The torchlight flickered across the porch boards like angry fireflies, and Sheriff Franklin Masters counted 23 men in the mob before his attention settled on the one thing that mattered, keeping his hand steady on the Winchester. Behind him, through the thin walls of his modest homestead, he could hear Grenna's breathing, quick and shallow, the kind of breathing that came when someone was trying very hard not to make a sound. She had been washing dishes when they spotted the torches coming up the road, had dropped a plate that shattered across the kitchen floor, the sound still ringing in Franklin's ears as he had grabbed his rifle and told her to get back. Get away from the windows. Let him handle this. Now the mob stood at the edge of his property, 30 yards from the porch, close enough that he could see their faces in the torchlight. Some he recognized: Bill Henderson, who ran the general store; young Thomas Eckhart, who worked at the blacksmith; old Samuel Grimes, who had fought in the border wars and never quite came all the way back. Others were strangers, probably from the settlements further west, drawn by rumors and rage and the kind of fear that turned ordinary men into monsters. "Franklin," Bill Henderson called out, his voice carrying across the night air with false joviality. "We don't want no trouble with you. We're here for the orc." Franklin worked the lever on his Winchester, the metallic click loud in the sudden silence. "Then you came to the wrong place, Bill. There's no orcs here, just my property which you're currently trespassing on." A ripple went through the crowd, angry mutters and shuffling feet. Someone threw a rock that clattered against the porch railing, and Franklin tracked the movement with his rifle barrel without raising it fully. "Don't play us for fools," Samuel Grimes stepped forward, his weathered face harsh in the torchlight. "We saw her come into town with you last week. Green skin, tusks, the whole damned thing. You've been harboring a monster, Franklin, and that ain't something we can abide." Franklin's jaw tightened. Last week. He had needed supplies and had foolishly thought that bringing Grenna with him, showing people she was no threat, might help. Instead, it had lit a fuse that was now burning its way to his doorstep. "Her name is Grenna," Franklin said, his voice carrying the authority of 12 years wearing a badge, even though he had given that up 6 months ago. "And she hasn't done anything to any of you. She's been living here peacefully, helping with the farm, bothering nobody." Bothering nobody. Thomas Eckhart's young voice cracked with emotion. "My brother died fighting orcs in the border wars. They're killers, every last one of them." "Your brother died fighting orc raiders from the Blackfang clan," Franklin corrected, keeping his voice level even as his heart hammered. "Grenna isn't Blackfang. She was cast out by her own people for refusing to raid human settlements. She's as much a victim of this war as your brother was. It was the wrong thing to say." The crowd surged forward a few steps, and Franklin raised the Winchester to his shoulder, sighting down the barrel at Bill Henderson's chest. "Next man who takes a step loses whatever I'm aiming at," Franklin said quietly. The mob froze behind him. Franklin heard the door open. "No. God, no." He wanted to turn, to tell her to get back inside, but he could not take his eyes off the crowd. Grenna's voice came from behind his left shoulder, low and measured. "I will go with them." "The hell you will," Franklin said through gritted teeth. "I will not let you die for me, Franklin Masters." The sound of his full name in her accent, the slight guttural catch on the consonants, the careful precision of each syllable, almost broke something in his chest. She had only been living here for 3 months. 3 months that had somehow become the most important of his entire 42 years. "Get back inside, Grenna." "No." Bill Henderson's voice took on a triumphant edge. "You hear that, boys? Even the orc knows what's right. Come on down here, monster, and we'll make it quick." Franklin heard Grenna take a breath, knew she was about to step forward, and made his choice. He lowered the rifle slightly. just enough to show he was not actively aiming at anyone, and turned his body so he could see both the mob and Grenna. She stood in the doorway, tall and strong, her green skin pale in the lamplight from inside the house. She wore one of his old shirts, too large for her but belted at the waist, and her dark hair was tied back with a strip of leather. Her tusks, small compared to male orcs but still prominent, jutted from her lower jaw, and her amber eyes met his with a mixture of determination and sorrow. She was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen, and he was going to die before he let these bastards touch her. "Listen to me, all of you," Franklin raised his voice, addressing the crowd while keeping Grenna in his peripheral vision. "I know you're scared. I know you've lost people to orc raids, but killing an innocent won't bring them back. It'll just make you murderers." "She's not innocent," someone in the back shouted. "She's an orc. She saved my life," Franklin shot back. 2 months ago, when my roof caved in during that storm, I was trapped under the beams. Grenna pulled me out, carried me half a mile to Doc Peterson's place through the rain. Any of you would have left me to die rather than risk getting caught in another collapse. She didn't hesitate. Silence. He had not told anyone that story, had let people assume he had just been lucky when they found him recovering at the doctor's house. "That true, Peterson?" Bill Henderson called out, and Franklin realized with a sinking feeling that the doctor was somewhere in the crowd. A thin voice answered from the left side of the mob. "It's true. She brought him in, saved his life, no question." More muttering, but the energy had shifted slightly, uncertainty creeping in at the edges. Grenna spoke again, her voice stronger now. "I have killed no human. I have raided no settlements. When my clan demanded I participate in attacks on your people, I refused. They scarred my face and cast me out." She turned her head slightly, showing the 3 parallel scars that ran from her temple to her jaw, old wounds that had healed white against her green skin. "I would rather die alone in the wilderness than harm innocents. If you must have blood, take mine. But know that you kill someone who has only ever tried to live in peace." Franklin watched the crowd, saw the torches wavering, saw men looking at each other uncertainly. They had come expecting a monster, something they could hate without complication. Instead, they found a woman speaking with quiet dignity about choosing exile over violence. But mobs were unpredictable things, and Franklin saw Samuel Grimes's hand tightening on his own rifle. "Enough talk," Grimes said. "She's still an orc, she's still dangerous. We can't have them living among us, setting a precedent. Next thing you know, there'll be whole orc families moving into town, taking our land, our what, Samuel?" Franklin interrupted. "Our jobs. Grenna works harder than half the men I see standing here. Our safety. She's done nothing but help her neighbors. Last month she helped the Hendersons raise their new barn, or did you forget to mention that, Bill?" Bill Henderson had the grace to look uncomfortable. "She helped us," Bill admitted quietly. "Wouldn't even take payment, said neighbors help each other." "Because that's what she is," Franklin pressed, sensing an opening. "She's our neighbor. She's part of this community whether you like it or not. And I'll be damned if I stand by and let you kill her for the crime of being born different." "You're protecting her because you're bedding her," someone shouted from the back, and Franklin felt rage flare white-hot in his chest. "I'm protecting her because it's the right thing to do," he said coldly. "Same as I protected every person in this county when I wore the badge. Same as I'd protect any of you if someone came for you unjustly. That's what we do in civilized society. Or have you all forgotten that?" The word civilized hung in the air like a challenge. These were frontier people, proud of having built something out of the wilderness, proud of their communities and their laws. To suggest they were acting uncivilized cut deep. Thomas Eckhart lowered his torch slightly. Maybe we should just talk to the county sheriff. Let the law handle this. The county sheriff is 3 days' ride away, Samuel Grimes snapped. By the time he gets here, she could have murdered half the valley. I have been here 3 months, Grenna said, and Franklin heard the edge in her voice now, the anger breaking through her calm. If I wanted to murder people, why would I wait? Why would I help raise Barnes? Why would I save the life of a man I barely knew? She stepped forward, and Franklin moved slightly to keep himself between her and the crowd. You call me monster, but you are the ones who come in the night with torches and weapons to kill someone who has done you no harm. Which of us is the monster? It was a good question, the kind that should have made them all drop their torches and go home ashamed. But Franklin had been a lawman long enough to know that fear and shame often mixed into something explosive. Samuel Grimes raised his rifle. Franklin's Winchester came up in the same instant, aimed center mass on the old soldier. Don't! You'd shoot me for a monster, Grimes asked, but his hands were shaking now. I'd shoot you to protect an innocent, Franklin corrected. Just like I shot that claim jumper who was about to kill your son 5 years ago, Samuel. Remember that. Remember how you thanked me, told me I'd always have your loyalty. Grimes's face twisted with memory and conflict. This ain't the same, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. It's exactly the same. Someone threatening violence against someone who doesn't deserve it. The only difference is skin color and tusks. If that's enough to change your moral compass, then you're not the man I thought you were. The standoff stretched into painful seconds. Franklin's arms were beginning to ache from holding the rifle steady, but he did not waver. Behind him, he could feel Grenna's presence like a warm flame, could hear her breathing, could sense her readiness to either fight or flee depending on which became necessary. Finally, Bill Henderson sighed and lowered his torch. This ain't right, he said. Coming here like this, threatening Franklin. He's been good to this community. If he vouches for her, maybe we should give it some time, see if there's trouble. Are you serious? Samuel Grimes turned on him. You're going to trust. I trust Franklin, Bill interrupted. Known him 15 years. He's never steered us wrong. If he says she's safe, I'm willing to give her a chance. Give her a chance? Grimes's voice rose. How many chances did the orcs give our boys in the border wars? How many? The border wars are over. Doc Peterson's thin voice cut in, and Franklin saw the elderly doctor pushing through to the front of the crowd. Been over for 2 years. If we keep fighting them in our hearts, they'll never truly end. Maybe it's time we tried something different. Something different, Grimes repeated bitterly. Like what? Living side by side with monsters. Like giving peace an actual chance, Peterson said. He looked up at the porch, his eyes meeting Grenna's. You really pull Franklin out of that collapsed building? Yes, Grenna said simply. Why? Grenna was quiet for a moment, and Franklin realized he had never actually asked her that question. He had been too grateful for survival, too focused on recovery, and then too caught up in the strange domestic rhythm they had fallen into. Because I heard him calling for help, Grenna said finally. And where I come from, you do not leave warriors to die alone in the dark, even enemy warriors. It is dishonorable. But Franklin wasn't your enemy, Peterson pressed. No, Grenna agreed, but I did not know that yet. I only knew someone needed help. The doctor nodded slowly, then turned to face the crowd. I've been practicing medicine for 43 years. I've seen the best and worst of people. And I can tell you that what that orc woman did, risking her life for a stranger, that's the best of us. That's what we should be aspiring to, not this. He gestured at the torches and weapons. Not coming in the night to kill someone for being different. The crowd was fracturing now. Franklin could see it. Some were already backing away, shame-faced. Others still gripped their weapons, unwilling to let go of their fear and hatred. It could still go either way. Franklin made a decision. He lowered his rifle completely, though he kept it ready in a low carry position. "Here's what's going to happen," he said, using the command voice that had kept order in rough mining camps and border towns. "You all are going to go home. Grenna is going to stay here on my property, living her life peacefully. If any of you have a legitimate complaint against her, and I mean legitimate, like theft or assault, not just being an orc, you bring it to me, and we'll handle it properly. But if anyone comes back here with torches and violence, they'll answer to me. And I may not wear a badge anymore, but I've still got friends in the county sheriff's office, and I will see justice done. We clear?" Bill Henderson nodded. "Clear, Franklin." He raised his voice. "Come on, boys, let's go home." The crowd began to disperse, slowly at first, then with increasing speed as the mob mentality broke apart into individuals who suddenly realized how close they had come to murder. Thomas Eckhart actually met Franklin's eyes and mouthed sorry before hurrying away, but Samuel Grimes did not move. He stood at the edge of the property, his rifle still in his hands, his face hard in the dying torchlight as others departed around him. "This ain't over, Franklin," he said quietly. "You're making a mistake. That thing behind you, it's going to turn on you someday. And when it does, when you're lying dead with your throat torn out, don't expect me to feel sorry for you." "Noted," Franklin said evenly. "Now get off my property." Grimes spat in the dirt, then turned and walked away into the darkness, the last of the mob finally gone. Franklin stood on the porch for a long time after, watching the empty road, making sure no one circled back. His arms ached from holding the rifle ready, and his heart was still hammering against his ribs. Finally, when he was certain they were truly alone, he lowered the Winchester and turned to face Grenna. She was crying. It shocked him more than the mob had. In 3 months of living together, sharing the farmhouse, working side by side, he had never seen her cry. She had been stoic through pain, through loneliness, through the hard labor of farm work. But now tears tracked down her green cheeks, glinting in the lamplight, and her shoulders shook with suppressed sobs. "Grenna," he said helplessly. "You should have let them take me," she said, her voice breaking. "You nearly died for me. Again. How many times must I bring death to your door before you understand that I am poison to you?" "That's not true," Franklin said, setting the rifle down and stepping toward her. She backed away, shaking her head. "It is true. I am orc. You are human. This cannot work. I was foolish to think I could ever find peace here. I should go tonight before more come, before they hurt you." "Nobody's going to hurt me," Franklin said, "and you're not going anywhere." "You do not command me," Grenna snapped, anger flashing through her tears. "I am not some pet to be kept." "I know that," Franklin said, stung. "That's not what then what? What am I to you, Franklin Masters? Why did you risk your life for me? Why do you let me stay here when it brings you nothing but trouble?" The question hung between them, enormous and unavoidable. Franklin realized they had been dancing around it for weeks, maybe months, ever since that moment when Grenna had hauled him out of the collapsed building and carried him through the storm, ever since he had woken up in the doctor's office and learned that an orc had saved his life. She had been staying in a cave in the hills then, surviving on forage and small game, trying to stay out of sight. When he had recovered enough to walk, he had gone looking for her, partly to thank her and partly because he could not stop thinking about the sight of her face, determined and fierce, cutting through the rain-soaked darkness. He had found her cold and hungry, trying to start a fire with wet wood, and he had said the words that changed everything. "Come stay at my place, just until you figure out your next move. I owe you that much." She had refused at first. Too dangerous, she said. People would not understand. But he had insisted, and eventually she had agreed, just for a few days. Days became weeks. Weeks became months. And somewhere in there, between shared meals and quiet evenings by the fire, between working the farm together and teaching each other their different ways, something had shifted. He had started looking forward to her presence, to her dry humor and unexpected insights, to the way she hummed while cooking, to the careful way she mended things that most people would have thrown away. He had started to fall in love with her, though he had been too afraid to examine that feeling too closely. Now, standing on his porch with the ghost of the mob still hanging in the air, Franklin realized he was done being afraid. "You're here because I want you here," he said quietly. "Because I wake up every morning and the first thing I think about is whether you're still here or if you've decided to leave. Because the thought of you walking out that door and never coming back makes me feel like someone's hollowing out my chest with a dull knife. Because somewhere in the last 3 months, you stopped being a guest and started being," he hesitated, then forced himself to say it, "started being someone I can't imagine my life without." Grenna stared at him, her amber eyes wide, tears still on her cheeks. "Franklin, you cannot mean, I mean every word," he said. "I know it's complicated. I know there are 100 reasons why this is a bad idea, but I also know that when that mob showed up tonight, the only thing I could think about was keeping you safe. Not because I owed you. Not because it was the right thing to do, because he took a breath. Because I love you, Grenna, and if that makes me a fool, then I'm a fool." The silence stretched between them. Somewhere in the distance, a night bird called. The lamp inside the house flickered, sending shadows dancing across the porch. Then Grenna stepped forward and kissed him. Her tusks made it awkward at first, but they figured it out, adjusting angles until their mouths met properly. She tasted like the mint tea she had been drinking before the mob arrived, and her lips were surprisingly soft. Franklin's arms came up around her, pulling her close, and she made a small sound against his mouth that sent heat flooding through his veins. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Grenna rested her forehead against his. "I love you too," she whispered. "I have tried not to. I have told myself it is impossible, that it will only bring pain, but I cannot help it. You are kind and brave and stubborn, and you look at me like I am not a monster, like I am just a woman." "You are just a woman," Franklin said. "An extraordinary woman, but still, just a woman," she laughed, a wet sound mixed with tears. "You are the only one who sees me that way." "Then everyone else is blind," Franklin said firmly. He cupped her face in his hands, thumbs brushing away her tears. "We'll figure this out, Grenna, together. I don't care what anyone says. I don't care if the whole county comes after us. I'm not giving you up." "They will make your life very difficult," Grenna warned. "Let them try," Franklin said. "I've dealt with worse than gossipy neighbors." They went back inside together, and Franklin locked the door and checked the windows, old lawman habits reasserting themselves. Grenna cleaned up the broken plate from earlier, then made fresh tea while Franklin finally allowed himself to set down the Winchester. They sat at the kitchen table, hands entwined across the worn wood, and talked until the lamp burned low. They talked about the mob and what it meant, about whether more would come, about what they should do. They talked about their feelings, haltingly at first, then with increasing openness. They talked about the future, about the impossibility and necessity of it. "I cannot stay here if it puts you in danger," Grenna said at one point. "You're staying," Franklin said. "We'll make it work. Maybe we need to talk to people more, help them see you're not a threat. Maybe we need to reach out to the county authorities, get some official protection. Or maybe we just need to be patient and let people get used to the idea." "Humans do not get used to orcs," Grenna said darkly. "Some humans don't," Franklin corrected. "But Bill Henderson changed his mind tonight, so did Doc Peterson, So did Thomas Eckhart. That's a start. Grenna looked doubtful but did not argue further. Instead, she squeezed his hand and changed the subject. When you said you love me, did you mean as a friend or not as a friend? Franklin said quickly. I mean, yes, you're my friend, but that's not all you are. I meant, he felt heat creeping up his neck. I meant romantically. I'm in love with you, Grenna, the whole complicated mess of it. A smile tugged at the corners of her mouth, making her tusks more prominent. Good, because I am in love with you too, the whole complicated mess. They kissed again, slower this time, exploring the newness of it. Franklin had been married once, years ago, before his wife had died of fever. He had thought he was done with romance, too old and settled for those kinds of feelings. But Grenna made him feel young again, made him feel like anything was possible. When they finally went to bed still in separate rooms, though Franklin found himself wishing otherwise, he lay awake for a long time, listening to the house settle around him, listening for the sound of torches and angry voices. But the night remained quiet, and eventually he drifted off, thinking about green skin and amber eyes and the feeling of tusks brushing against his face. The next morning, Franklin woke to the smell of breakfast cooking and found Grenna in the kitchen, making eggs and bacon with practiced efficiency. She had cleaned the whole house, he realized, probably because she had been too anxious to sleep. Every surface gleamed and the floors had been swept and mopped. You didn't have to do all this, Franklin said, pouring himself coffee. I needed to do something with my hands, Grenna admitted. I kept thinking about last night, about what comes next. What comes next is breakfast, Franklin said firmly. Then we feed the animals, check the south fence, and maybe ride into town. Grenna nearly dropped the pan. Into town? Are you insane? We can't hide forever, Franklin said. If we want people to accept you, they need to see you being normal, going about daily life, not cowering like you've done something wrong. But last night was a mob mentality. Today, in daylight, with people going about their business, it'll be different. We'll go slow, talk to people we know are friendly first. Bill Henderson, Doc Peterson, build bridges. Grenna looked terrified, but she nodded slowly. If you think it is wise. I think it's necessary, Franklin said, but we'll be careful, and if things get ugly, we leave. No arguments. They finished breakfast and did the morning chores, falling into the comfortable rhythm they had developed over the past months. Grenna was good with animals, better than Franklin in some ways. She had a natural calm that soothed the livestock, and she was strong enough to handle the heavy work of farm life without complaint. Around mid-morning, they hitched up the wagon and headed toward town. It was a 5-mile ride, through rolling hills and past neighboring farms. A few people were out working their fields, and Franklin waved to them as he always did. Some waved back. Others just stared at Grenna, faces unreadable. The town of Millbrook was small, just a main street with a dozen buildings: general store, blacksmith, doctor's office, saloon, church, and a few others. On a typical day, maybe 20 or 30 people would be moving about, conducting business or socializing. Today, as Franklin guided the wagon down the main street, it seemed like 100 people had materialized out of nowhere, all stopping to stare at the sight of the former sheriff riding through town with an orc woman at his side. Grenna sat straight-backed and silent, her face carefully neutral, but Franklin could see the tension in her shoulders. He kept the wagon moving at a steady pace, neither hurrying nor dawdling, until he pulled up in front of the general store. Bill Henderson was standing on the porch, and for a moment Franklin thought the man might retreat inside. But then Bill took a breath and stepped forward. Franklin. Miss Grenna. Bill, Franklin said, climbing down from the wagon. Need to pick up some supplies. That's still acceptable. Bill looked at Grenna, then back at Franklin. It's acceptable. Come on in." It was a small victory, but Franklin felt a surge of relief as they entered the store. Other customers inside went silent, watching as Grenna moved carefully through the aisles, selecting what they needed. She kept her movements deliberate and slow, non-threatening, and Franklin stayed close without hovering. At the counter, as Bill tallied up their purchases, he spoke quietly. "I'm sorry about last night. Got caught up in the moment, in the fear. But my wife reminded me this morning that your Miss Grenna worked harder than anyone at our barn raising, and she didn't deserve what we tried to do." "Apology accepted," Franklin said. "And she's not my Miss Grenna, she's just Grenna, her own person." Bill nodded, then lowered his voice even further. "Fair warning, though, Samuel Grimes is still stirring up trouble. Been talking about writing to the territorial governor, claiming you're harboring an enemy combatant or some such nonsense." "Let him write," Franklin said. "The border wars are over." "There's no legal basis for that claim. Legal and practical are two different things out here," Bill said. "You watch yourself." They finished the transaction and loaded the supplies into the wagon. As they were preparing to leave, Doc Peterson emerged from his office across the street and walked over. "Miss Grenna," he said with a slight nod, "I wonder if I might impose on you for a moment. I've got a patient with a dislocated shoulder, and I could use someone with your strength to help me set it properly." Grenna looked at Franklin, who nodded encouragingly. "Of course, doctor," she said. Franklin watched as Grenna followed Peterson into his office, recognizing this for what it was, a public show of trust and acceptance from one of the town's most respected citizens. It was a good move, and he silently thanked the old doctor for his wisdom. While he waited, Franklin became aware of someone approaching the wagon. He turned to find Thomas Eckhart, the young blacksmith's apprentice, shuffling his feet nervously. "Mr. Masters, I just wanted to say I'm sorry for last night. I was angry about my brother and I took it out on someone who didn't deserve it. That wasn't right." "Thank you, Thomas," Franklin said. "That takes courage, apologizing. Your brother would have been proud." The young man's eyes reddened slightly, but he nodded and hurried away. Franklin felt another small flutter of hope. Maybe this could work. Maybe people could change, could learn to see past their fear. Grenna emerged from the doctor's office 20 minutes later, and they headed back to the farm. On the ride home, she was quiet, processing the experience. "Some people stared with hatred," she said finally, "but some just looked curious. And Bill Henderson was kind. So was Doc Peterson." "That's how it starts," Franklin said. "One person at a time, people realizing you're not a threat. It won't be quick and it won't be easy, but it's possible." "Because of you," Grenna said. "Because they respect you. If I were alone, they would have killed me already." "Maybe," Franklin acknowledged, "but you're not alone. And someday you won't need my reputation to protect you. They'll see your own worth." Grenna reached across the wagon seat and took his hand. They rode the rest of the way in comfortable silence, fingers entwined, each drawing strength from the other. The weeks that followed fell into a pattern. Franklin and Grenna went to town once a week, always together, always conducting themselves with quiet dignity. Grenna helped Doc Peterson with difficult patients, her strength proving invaluable for medical procedures. She continued to assist neighbors with heavy work when asked, never requesting payment, always gracious. Slowly, grudgingly, some of the townspeople began to soften. Not all of them. Samuel Grimes remained openly hostile, and a core group shared his views, but enough that Grenna could walk down the main street without fearing immediate violence. At home, Franklin and Grenna's relationship deepened. They were careful about public displays of affection, knowing that would be a step too far for most people, but in private, they grew increasingly comfortable with each other. Stolen kisses while doing dishes, hands finding each other while sitting by the fire. Long conversations that stretched into the night, learning each other's histories and dreams. Grenna told him about her childhood in the Orc clans, about the emphasis on strength and honor, about the raids that were seen as tests of courage rather than acts of violence. She spoke about the moment she had questioned those values, when she saw a human child crying over her dead father, and realized that the glory her people sought came at a terrible price. Franklin told her about his years as a sheriff, about the violence he had seen and participated in, about the weight of taking lives even when legally justified. He spoke about his late wife, about the guilt he still carried for not being there when the fever took her, about his decision to give up the badge and try to find some kind of peace in farming. "You think she would approve?" Grenna asked one night, curled against his side on the porch swing. "Your wife, of me?" Franklin considered the question carefully. Maria was practical above all else. She would have asked if you made me happy, and when I said yes, she would have said that's all that matters. She wasn't one for caring what others thought. "I wish I could have known her," Grenna said. "I think you two would have gotten along," Franklin said. "She was stubborn as hell. Remind me of anyone." Grenna elbowed him gently, and he laughed, pulling her closer. These moments felt stolen from time, precious and fragile. He knew their peace was temporary, that challenges would come, but he allowed himself to be happy in the present. The first real test came in late summer, when the annual harvest festival approached. It was the biggest social event of the year, bringing together people from all the surrounding farms and settlements for 3 days of celebration, trade, and community building. "We should go," Franklin said when the subject came up over breakfast. Grenna looked at him like he had suggested walking into a forest fire. "Absolutely not. Hear me out," Franklin said. "If you don't go, people will say you're antisocial, unfriendly, probably plotting something. If you do go, participate in the community, let people see you having fun and being normal, it breaks down those prejudices. Or they will kill me in a crowd where it is easier to hide who struck the blow," Grenna said dryly. "I won't let anything happen to you," Franklin promised. "You cannot watch every direction at once. Then we'll bring friends. Doc Peterson will be there, Bill Henderson, others who have come around." Grenna was quiet for a long time, staring into her tea. Finally, she sighed. "If it is important to you, I will go, but I will carry a knife." "Fair enough," Franklin said. "I'll be armed too, just in case." The harvest festival took place in a large field on the outskirts of Millbrook, with tents and stalls set up in rows and a central area cleared for music and dancing. When Franklin and Grenna arrived on the first day, the crowd's reaction was immediate and varied. Some people went silent, watching warily. Others turned their backs, making their disapproval clear. But a few Bill Henderson and his wife, Doc Peterson, Thomas Eckhart and his mother came over to greet them warmly. "Glad you came," Bill said, shaking Franklin's hand and nodding respectfully to Grenna. "My wife made extra apple pie if you're interested." "We would be honored," Grenna said, her formal speech patterns making the simple acceptance sound dignified. They spent the day moving through the festival, stopping at various stalls, talking to people who were willing to talk, ignoring those who were not. Grenna tried candied apples for the first time and declared them sticky but acceptable, which made Franklin laugh. She examined the crafts for sale with genuine interest, admiring the workmanship even as some of the vendors looked nervous about her proximity. In the afternoon, there were competitions: axe throwing, archery, tests of strength. Franklin was content to watch, but several people encouraged Grenna to participate in the log-splitting contest. "Show them what you can do," Franklin murmured. "Let them see your strength used for something productive, not destructive." Grenna hesitated, then nodded. She stepped up to the competition area where a large pile of logs waited. The rules were simple: whoever could split the most logs in 5 minutes won. The other competitors were all large men, farmers and laborers used to hard physical work. They eyed Grenna with a mixture of skepticism and concern. But when the competition started, Grenna demonstrated the efficiency of orc strength combined with human technique. She worked with smooth, economical movements, her axe falling in precise strokes that split each log cleanly. By the end of 5 minutes, her pile of split wood was noticeably larger than anyone else's. The judge, a neutral party from a neighboring county, declared her the winner. There was scattered applause, and Franklin saw several men nodding with grudging respect. It was not acceptance, not yet, but it was acknowledgement of skill and capability. Grenna accepted the prize, a new axe head, ironically with grace, then immediately offered to help stack all the split wood for use by the town during winter. This gesture of community contribution seemed to win over a few more people. As evening fell and music started, Franklin made a bold choice. He offered his hand to Grenna. "Dance with me." She looked terrified. "Franklin, that is too much. People will let them talk," Franklin said. "I want to dance with the woman I love. That's not a crime." Grenna took his hand and they moved to the dancing area. Other couples had already gathered, swaying to the fiddle music. When Franklin and Grenna joined them, several people stopped dancing to stare. But others, perhaps emboldened by the day's events, perhaps just caught up in the music and celebration, continued dancing around them. Franklin held Grenna carefully, mindful of her tusks, guiding her through the simple steps. She was not a natural dancer, but she followed his lead, and soon they found a rhythm. Her hand was warm in his, her other arm resting on his shoulder, and Franklin felt a surge of fierce affection for this brave woman who was enduring so much just to be with him. The song ended, and another began. More couples joined the dancing, and the atmosphere eased slightly. Franklin and Grenna danced 3 more songs before taking a break, both flushed and slightly breathless. "That was not as terrible as I feared," Grenna admitted. "High praise," Franklin teased. They found seats near one of the bonfires and accepted cups of cider from Bill Henderson's wife, who chatted pleasantly about the weather and the harvest prospects. It felt almost normal, almost like they were just another couple enjoying the festival. Then Samuel Grimes appeared out of the darkness, drunk and belligerent. "This is obscene," he announced loudly, pointing at Franklin and Grenna. "We let an orc into our festival, into our community, and now they're dancing together like it's normal. Like it's acceptable for a man to debase himself with a monster." The conversations around the bonfire died. Franklin stood slowly, positioning himself between Grimes and Grenna. "Go home, Samuel. You're drunk." "I'm drunk enough to say what everyone's thinking," Grimes shot back. "That you've lost your mind, Franklin Masters. That you're betraying your own kind for a piece of green-skinned tail." Franklin's fist connected with Grimes's jaw before he fully processed the decision to throw the punch. The old soldier went down hard, sprawling in the dirt. The crowd gasped. Grimes spat blood and started to rise, reaching for the knife at his belt, but Doc Peterson and Bill Henderson were suddenly there, grabbing his arms. "Enough, Samuel," Peterson said firmly. "You insulted the lady. You got what you deserved, now go home and sleep it off." Grimes struggled briefly, then seemed to deflate. He looked at Franklin with genuine hatred. "You'll regret this, both of you, mark my words." He stumbled away into the darkness, and the crowd slowly returned to their conversations and activities, though the mood had shifted. Franklin rubbed his knuckles, already regretting the violence even if the provocation had been extreme. Grenna touched his arm. "We should go." "We're not letting him chase us away," Franklin said stubbornly. "We are not being chased. We are making a strategic retreat," Grenna said. "We came, we participated, we made our point. Staying now after violence would only create more problems." She was right, Franklin realized. They had accomplished what they came for, shown the community that Grenna could be part of their social fabric. Pushing further tonight would only cement the image of them as troublemakers. They said their goodbyes to the few people who seemed genuinely sorry to see them leave, then headed back to the wagon. The ride home was quiet, both of them processing the evening's events. "I am sorry he said those things to you," Grenna said eventually. "About you debasing yourself. That must hurt to have your own people see you that way." "Some of my people," Franklin corrected. "Not all. And honestly, I don't care what Samuel Grimes thinks. I care what you think." "I think you are the bravest, most honorable man I have ever known," Grenna said quietly. "And I do not deserve you." "You have that backwards," Franklin said. "I don't deserve you. You could have walked away from this mess a dozen times. Could have gone north to the Orc territories that accepted the peace treaty or west to the unclaimed lands. But you stayed, putting up with prejudice and threats just to be near me." "Because I love you," Grenna said simply. "Love makes us foolish." "Then I'm the biggest fool in the territory," Franklin said, reaching across to take her hand. "And I wouldn't have it any other way." When they got home, the adrenaline and emotion of the evening finally caught up with them. In the barn, while putting away the horses, Grenna suddenly pulled Franklin into a fierce kiss, all tusks and passion and desperate need. He responded in kind, backing her against the barn wall, losing himself in the feeling of her. They made it into the house, barely, and into Franklin's room, which Grenna had never entered before. The boundary crossed seemed significant, a wordless acknowledgement of what they both wanted. "Are you sure?" Franklin asked, even as his hands found the buttons of her shirt. "I have never been more sure of anything," Grenna said, pulling him down onto the bed. They made love with a mixture of tenderness and urgency, learning each other's bodies, navigating the small physical differences with care and growing confidence. Afterward, lying tangled together in the darkness, Franklin felt a profound sense of peace. This was right. Whatever the world thought, whatever challenges they would face, this was exactly where he was supposed to be. "I want to marry you," he said into the darkness. Grenna went still against him. "That is not possible. No church would allow it. No town clerk would register it." "Then we'll do it ourselves," Franklin said. "Make our own vows, our own commitment. I don't need the law's permission to pledge my life to you." Grenna was quiet for so long that Franklin thought she might refuse. Then she said in a voice thick with emotion, "In my culture, marriages are sealed with blade scars. Partners cut their palms and clasp hands, mixing their blood. It is considered binding for life." "Then that's what we'll do," Franklin said. "Tomorrow if you want, or next month. Whenever you're ready." "Tomorrow," Grenna said firmly. "I do not want to wait. I have waited my whole life to find someone who sees me as I am. I will not waste another day." They married themselves at dawn, standing in the field behind the farmhouse with no witnesses but the rising sun. Franklin used his pocket knife to make a shallow cut across his palm, then handed it to Grenna, who did the same. They clasped hands, blood mingling, and spoke their vows. Franklin went first. "I pledge myself to you, Grenna, for all my days, to stand with you against whatever comes, to honor and cherish you as my partner and my love. From this day forward, your battles are my battles, your joys are my joys. I am yours." Grenna's voice was steady and strong. "I pledge myself to you, Franklin Masters, for all my days, to stand with you against whatever comes, to honor and cherish you as my partner and my love. From this day forward, your battles are my battles, your joys are my joys. I am yours." They kissed, sealing the vow, and Franklin felt something settle in his chest, a rightness that went beyond words. They were married now, in the ways that mattered. The rest of the world could accept it or not. They bound their hands with clean cloth and went back into the house to make breakfast, moving around the kitchen with new awareness of their commitment. Everything felt slightly different, charged with significance. The world, unfortunately, did not care about their personal happiness. 3 days after their private wedding, Franklin was in town picking up mail when the territorial marshal rode in with 6 armed deputies. Marshal Robert Chen was a hard man in his 50s, with iron gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. He stopped Franklin on the street. "Mr. Masters, I need to speak with you about the orc you're harboring." Franklin's stomach sank, but he kept his voice level. "Her name is Grenna, and I'm not harboring her. She's living on my land legally, as a free person." "That's a matter of some debate," Chen said. "I've received complaints from concerned citizens about a potential security threat. I need to verify her status and ensure she's not a danger to the community." "Who complained?" Franklin asked, though he already knew. "Samuel Grimes, among others." "Look, I'm not here to cause trouble, but I have a job to do. I need to interview the orc, check her for clan markings, make sure she's not a spy or scout for raiders." "She's not," Franklin said flatly. "She was exiled from her clan 2 years ago. She's been living peacefully since." "Then she won't mind answering some questions," Chen said. "Where is she?" Franklin considered refusing, but he knew that would only make things worse. "At my farm, 5 miles east. I'll take you there." The ride back to the farm felt like a funeral procession, Franklin in the lead, the marshal and his 6 deputies following behind. Franklin's mind raced, trying to figure out how to protect Grenna from whatever was about to happen. Grenna was working in the garden when they arrived. She straightened as the group of armed men rode up, her hand moving instinctively to the knife at her belt. Franklin dismounted quickly and went to her side. "It's all right," he said quietly. "Territorial Marshal wants to ask you some questions." Grenna's eyes flickered over the deputies, calculating odds. Franklin knew she could probably take down 3 or 4 of them before they brought her down, but that would end with her death or arrest. He squeezed her hand, their bound palms from the wedding ceremony still tender beneath the bandages. Marshal Chen dismounted and approached respectfully, though his hand stayed near his sidearm. "Miss Grenna, I'm Marshal Chen. I need to verify some information. May we speak?" "We may," Grenna said, her voice carefully neutral. Chen pulled out a notebook. "First, what clan are you from?" "Stonefang," Grenna said, "of the northern mountains. And you're no longer with them." "I was exiled," Grenna said, "for refusing to participate in raids against human settlements." "Can you prove that?" Grenna turned her head, showing the 3 parallel scars on her face. "Exile scars. Given by the clan chief himself. Any orc would recognize them." Chen made notes. "When did this happen?" 2 years, 3 months, 17 days ago," Grenna said precisely. "I have counted everyone." "And where have you been since?" "Surviving in the wilderness. Moving south, away from the border regions. I came to this area 6 months ago. I met Franklin Masters 4 months ago when I pulled him from a collapsed building. I have been living on his land for 3 months. During which time have you had contact with any orc clans or raiders?" "No," Grenna said firmly. "I have seen no orcs since my exile. I do not seek them, and they do not seek me. To my clan I am dead." Chen studied her for a long moment. "You understand this is unusual. Orcs don't typically integrate into human society." "I am not typical," Grenna said. "I seek only to live in peace." One of the deputies spoke up, a young man with nervous eyes. "Marshal, there's been talk that she and Masters are," he hesitated, "involved, romantically. Chen's eyebrows rose. He looked at Franklin. Is that true? Franklin met his gaze steadily. Yes. We're married as of 3 days ago. The deputies muttered among themselves, and Chen's expression grew complicated. Married. There's no legal framework for that, you understand. An orc can't be married to a human under territorial law. Then the law is wrong, Franklin said bluntly. We made our vows. We're married in every way that matters. This complicates things, Chen said, rubbing his forehead. Samuel Grimes and his allies are claiming you're under the orc's influence, that she's manipulated you somehow for nefarious purposes. That's ridiculous, Franklin said. I'm a grown man making my own choices. I'm inclined to agree, Chen said. I've known you for 15 years, Franklin. You are a damn good sheriff and you're not easily manipulated, but I have to report back on this situation, and I need to be able to tell my superiors that there's no threat. He turned back to Grenna. Will you submit to a magical examination? We have a bonded truth seeker in the capital who can verify your claims about your exile and intentions. Grenna looked at Franklin, who nodded slightly. It was invasive and humiliating, but if it cleared her legally, it might be worth it. I will submit, Grenna said. When and where, I can send for the truth seeker. She should arrive within a week. You'll need to come to the marshal's office in Millbrook. I will be there, Grenna said. Chen made more notes, then closed his book. All right. For now, I'm not seeing evidence of an active threat. Miss Grenna, you're free to continue living here, but I'm going to ask that you keep a low profile until the truth seeker arrives and clears you. No going into town, no large public gatherings. Mr. Masters, you're responsible for her whereabouts. If she runs, I'll consider that an admission of guilt and I'll come after both of you. We clear, Franklin said, though he hated the implication that Grenna was a criminal on probation. The marshal and his deputies rode away, leaving Franklin and Grenna standing in the yard. Grenna's shoulders slumped as soon as they were out of sight. This will never end, she said quietly. There will always be someone questioning my right to exist here, someone seeing me as a threat. The truth seeker will clear you, Franklin said, and then we'll have legal standing to push back against Grimes and his ilk. And if she does not clear me? Grenna asked. Truth seekers see into the heart. What if she sees my doubts, my fears? What if she sees the part of me that is still orc, still capable of violence? Everyone is capable of violence, Franklin said. Being capable doesn't make you guilty. What matters is what you choose to do with that capability. Grenna leaned against him and Franklin wrapped his arms around her. They stood like that for a long time, drawing comfort from each other's presence. The week until the truth seeker's arrival was tense. Grenna obeyed the marshal's request to stay on the farm, though it clearly chafed at her. Franklin went to town alone for supplies, enduring whispers and pointed looks. Samuel Grimes had apparently been spreading his version of events widely, painting Grenna as a dangerous manipulator and Franklin as her victim. Doc Peterson stopped by midweek to check on them. Town's divided, he reported. About half the people think the marshal is right to investigate. The other half think Grenna should be arrested immediately just for being orc. Samuel's been drinking more than usual, talking loud about taking matters into his own hands if the law won't act. Let him try, Franklin said grimly. I'm more worried about him getting a group together again, Peterson said. Mob mentality is dangerous. You watch yourself. Franklin increased their security, setting up simple alarms around the property perimeter, strings of bells that would sound if someone crossed them. He cleaned and loaded all his firearms, including a shotgun he kept by the bedroom door. Grenna sharpened her knife and fashioned a spear from a broken tool handle and an old blade. They were preparing for war, Franklin realized, even as they tried to maintain the peaceful domestic life they had built. It felt wrong, but necessary. The truth seeker arrived on schedule, a middle-aged woman named Alina Harrow, with silver streaks in her dark hair and eyes that seemed to see through skin and bone. Marshal Chen brought her to the farm personally, along with 2 deputies as witnesses. "Miss Grenna," Harrow said, her voice surprisingly gentle, "I'm going to need to touch your temples and look into your thoughts and memories. It's not painful, but it can be unsettling. You'll feel exposed, like I'm reading your diary. I need your permission to proceed." Grenna looked at Franklin, who nodded encouragingly. She turned back to the truth seeker. "You have my permission." They sat at the kitchen table, Harrow facing Grenna. The truth seeker placed her fingers on Grenna's temples and her eyes went distant, unfocused. The room was silent except for the ticking of the clock on the mantel. Minutes passed. 5. 10. Franklin watched anxiously, seeing Grenna's face flicker through emotions: pain, sorrow, determination, fear. The truth seeker's expression remained neutral, professional. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Harrow removed her hands and sat back. "Well?" Marshal Chen asked. Harrow took a moment to compose herself, then spoke in her formal capacity. "I have examined the subject's memories and intentions. She is telling the truth about her exile from the Stonefang clan. I saw the memory of her refusal to raid, saw the punishment and exile. She has had no contact with orc raiders since. Her stated intention to live peacefully is genuine. She poses no threat to this community beyond the social disruption of her presence." Franklin felt a surge of relief so powerful it made him dizzy. Chen made notes. "And the relationship with Mr. Masters, is there evidence of manipulation or coercion?" Harrow actually smiled slightly. "None whatsoever. They are both acting of their own free will. If anything, Grenna has tried repeatedly to leave to protect Mr. Masters from social consequences, and he has consistently refused to let her go. It's quite mutual and genuine, Marshal." Chen closed his notebook. "Then I'll file a report clearing Miss Grenna of suspicion. As far as the territorial government is concerned, she's a legal resident with no restrictions beyond standard law. She's free to live her life as she chooses." The deputies looked disappointed, but they followed Chen out to their horses. Before mounting, the marshal turned back to Franklin. "This won't satisfy everyone. Samuel Grimes and his allies won't accept my report. They'll keep causing trouble." "Let them," Franklin said. "We have the law on our side now." "The law is only as strong as people's willingness to follow it," Chen said. "Out here on the frontier, that can be a fragile thing. Watch your back." After they left, Franklin and Grenna celebrated quietly, the relief of official clearance making everything feel lighter. But the marshal's warning proved prescient. 2 weeks later, Franklin was repairing a fence in the far pasture when he saw smoke rising from the direction of the house. He ran, heart pounding, arriving to find the barn on fire. Grenna was already there with buckets, trying to fight the flames, but it was too late. The structure was fully engulfed. They managed to save the animals, getting the horses and cow out before the roof collapsed, but the barn itself was a total loss. Standing in the yard, watching the flames die down to smoldering ruins, Franklin noticed something carved into the fence post near the barn door. A crude drawing of an orc head with a noose around its neck. "Grimes," Franklin said, voice tight with fury. "Or one of his friends," Grenna said. She was covered in soot and ash, her hands blistered from handling hot buckets. "This is a warning. Next time they will not just burn buildings." Franklin knew she was right. This was escalating. And while the territorial government might have cleared Grenna legally, local vigilantes clearly didn't care. He rode into town the next morning and went straight to the marshal's temporary office. Chen was preparing to return to the capital, but he listened to Franklin's account with a grim expression. I can ask the local sheriff to investigate, but without proof it was Grimes, there's not much we can do. Did you see anyone? No, but who else would it be? Chen sighed. I'll talk to him, put the fear of law into him. But Franklin, honestly, you might want to consider relocating. Somewhere with less history where people don't know about the border wars firsthand. Start fresh. This is my home, Franklin said stubbornly. I shouldn't have to leave because of bigots and arsonists. No, you shouldn't, Chen agreed. But sometimes what should be and what is are two different things. Think about it. Franklin rode home and found Grenna in the garden, methodically pulling weeds. She looked up as he approached. What did the marshal say? That we should leave, start over somewhere else? Grenna nodded slowly. Perhaps he is right. Perhaps we have been fighting a battle we cannot win. You want to leave? Franklin asked, surprised. I want you to be safe, Grenna said. I want to stop looking over my shoulder, wondering when the next attack will come. If leaving accomplishes that, then yes, I want to leave. Franklin sat down beside her in the dirt. Where would we go? West, Grenna said immediately. Past the settled territories into the open lands. There are valleys there, the marshal told me once, where the law has not yet reached, where we could build something new, just us. That's hard country, Franklin said. Dangerous. Wild animals, harsh weather, no neighbors to help if things go wrong. But no mobs, Grenna pointed out. No one to burn our buildings or carve threats into fence posts. Just us, living our lives. Franklin thought about it. He had roots here, history, friends. But he also had Grenna and a future that was looking increasingly untenable if they stayed. Let me think about it, he said finally. That night, lying in bed with Grenna curled against his side, Franklin made lists in his head. Reasons to stay, reasons to go. The scales kept tipping toward leaving, and by morning he had made his decision. All right, he said over breakfast. We'll go west, but we do it right. We sell the farm, get a fair price so we can afford to build something new. We stock up on supplies enough to last a year. And we find a place with water and good land, somewhere we can actually make a life. Grenna's face lit up with hope, and Franklin felt his heart clench at how beautiful she looked in that moment. They spent the next month preparing. Franklin put the word out that the farm was for sale, and to his surprise, Bill Henderson came forward with an offer. It was fair, maybe even generous, and Franklin realized the shopkeeper was trying to help in his own way. I'm sorry you're leaving, Bill said as they finalized the paperwork. And I'm sorry we made you feel like you had to. For what it's worth, I think you're doing the right thing. Going where you can just live without all this nonsense. Thank you, Bill, Franklin said, for everything, for changing your mind, for giving Grenna a chance. It means more than you know. They sold most of their possessions, keeping only what they could carry in a wagon: tools, seeds, basic supplies, weapons, and a few sentimental items. Grenna insisted on bringing the axe head she had won at the harvest festival, saying it was good luck. Doc Peterson came to say goodbye the day before they left, bringing a satchel of medical supplies. Take this. You're going to be far from any doctor. Learn what you can about basic medicine. Thomas Eckhart gave them a new set of horseshoes, expertly forged, for when the old ones wear out. Best I could make. Even some people who had been hostile seemed sad to see them go, as if they realized too late that they were losing something valuable from their community. Samuel Grimes did not come to say goodbye. Franklin saw him watching from a distance as they loaded the wagon, his face hard and unreadable. Franklin considered going over, trying one last time to make peace, but Grenna touched his arm. Let it go, she said quietly. Some people will never change. We cannot wait for them. They left at dawn on a clear autumn day, the wagon loaded and the horses fresh. Franklin took one last look at the farm he had lived on for 6 years, the place where he had thought he would spend the rest of his life. Then he turned forward, toward the west, toward the unknown, toward whatever future he and Grenna would build together. The journey took 3 weeks of hard travel. They followed wagon trails when they existed, forged their own path when they did not. They crossed rivers and climbed mountain passes, navigated dense forests and open plains. At night, they camped under the stars, taking turns on watch, ready for threats that rarely materialized. Grenna was in her element in the wilderness. She could track game, find water, identify edible plants. Franklin had his own wilderness skills from his years as a lawman, but he was impressed by how naturally Grenna moved through the wild landscape, how at home she seemed. "This is how I lived after my exile," she explained one night as they made camp. "For 2 years I wandered. I learned every plant, every animal track, every sign of weather. I became part of the land. And then you met me and got dragged back into human society," Franklin said. "And then I met you and found something worth more than solitude," Grenna corrected, kissing him. "I would choose you over the wilderness any day." They found their valley in the 4th week of travel, a long, lush depression between 2 mountain ridges, with a clear stream running through it and dense forest on the slopes. The valley floor was open meadow, perfect for farming and grazing. Best of all, they saw no signs of human habitation, no old cabins, no cleared land, no trails beyond game paths. "This is it," Franklin said, standing in the middle of the meadow and turning slowly to take it all in. "This is home." They built their new life from scratch. Using timber from the forest and stone from the stream, they constructed a small cabin, snug and well-made. Franklin's experience and Grenna's strength combined to create something solid that would withstand the mountain winters. They cleared land for crops and built a small barn for the animals. They established a garden and put up preserves for winter. They hunted and fished and learned the rhythms of their valley. It was hard work, harder than anything Franklin had done before. But it was also deeply satisfying, building something that was entirely theirs, with no one to judge or threaten them. The first winter was brutal. Snow fell for days at a time, piling up against the cabin walls. They were trapped inside for long stretches, surviving on stored food and each other's company. But they had prepared well, and they weathered it. Spring came eventually, bringing thaw and new growth. Grenna proved to have a natural talent for gardening, and their crops flourished. Franklin built furniture and improved the cabin, adding a real fireplace and windows with actual glass panes that he had brought from Millbrook. They had been in the valley for 8 months when Grenna told Franklin she was pregnant. He was chopping wood when she came out of the cabin and just stood there, waiting for him to notice. When he finally looked up and saw her expression, nervous and hopeful and terrified all at once, he knew before she spoke. "I am with child," she said simply. Franklin dropped the axe and crossed to her in 3 strides, pulling her into his arms. "You're sure?" "I am sure. 2 months, I think. Maybe 3. Franklin felt a surge of emotion so powerful it nearly knocked him over, joy and fear and wonder all mixed together. "That's we're going to have a baby. We're going to be parents. Are you happy?" Grenna asked, her voice small. "Happy doesn't begin to cover it," Franklin said, pulling back to look at her face. "Terrified, yes. Worried about all the ways this could go wrong, absolutely. But happy." "Grenna, I'm more happy than I've ever been in my entire life." She smiled, and he saw tears in her eyes. "I was afraid you would be upset. A half-orc child, it will be complicated." "Our child," Franklin corrected. "And yes, it will be complicated. But we'll figure it out, just like we've figured out everything else." The pregnancy progressed normally, as far as they could tell. Franklin wished desperately for a doctor, for someone who knew about orc pregnancies and half-orc births, but they were on their own. They relied on Grenna's instincts and the basic medical knowledge they had between them. As Grenna's belly swelled, Franklin found himself building a cradle, then a changing table, then a chest for baby clothes that Grenna sewed from soft fabric. They were nesting, preparing, doing all the things that expectant parents do. "What if the child looks too orc?" Grenna asked one night, her hands on her belly. "What if it has tusks and green skin, and you cannot love it because it reminds you that I am not human?" "That's ridiculous," Franklin said firmly. "I love you exactly as you are, green skin and tusks and all. Why would I love our child any less? Because it is different to see those features on an adult who you chose versus a child who depends on you completely." Franklin took her hands in his. "Listen to me. I will love our child unconditionally no matter what they look like. Half human, half orc, or somehow both at once. They're ours, and that's all that matters." Grenna relaxed slightly, but Franklin could tell the fear lingered. He understood it. They were literally creating something new, a bridge between two species that had been at war for generations. The weight of that was enormous. The baby came in early autumn, after a labor that lasted 12 hours and left both Grenna and Franklin exhausted. Franklin delivered the child himself, his hands shaking but steady enough, and when he heard that first cry, he felt something inside him break and remake itself. "It is a girl," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "We have a daughter." He cleaned the baby carefully and wrapped her in a soft blanket, then placed her in Grenna's arms. They both stared at her, taking in every detail. She had green-tinted skin, lighter than Grenna's but definitely not human pale. Her eyes, when they opened, were amber. She had small points to her ears and tiny nubs that might become tusks as she grew. But she also had Franklin's nose and chin, Grenna's cheekbones and hair color. She was perfect. "What should we name her?" Grenna asked, her voice full of wonder. Franklin thought about it. "Something that honors both our heritages, a human name and an orc name." "Maya," Grenna said immediately. "It is an orc name meaning strength, but it also sounds human enough." "Maya Masters," Franklin tested. "I like it." They spent the rest of the day in a haze of new parent exhaustion and joy, taking turns holding Maya, learning her different cries and needs. Franklin felt a protectiveness surge through him that was almost primal. He would die before he let anything harm this tiny creature. The first year of Maya's life was a blur of sleepless nights and small miracles. She grew quickly, hitting milestones that seemed too early for a human baby but were apparently normal for half-orcs. She was strong, able to lift her head and roll over earlier than Franklin expected. Her personality emerged gradually stubborn like both her parents, curious about everything, quick to laugh but also quick to cry when frustrated. She loved being outside, would calm immediately when taken into the meadow or forest. She seemed to have an instinctive connection to animals, just like Grenna. Franklin had never imagined himself as a father, especially not at his age, but he took to it naturally. He fashioned toys from wood, sang lullabies in his rough voice, walked the cabin floor for hours when Maya was fussy. Grenna was a fierce and protective mother, nursing Maya and watching over her with unwavering attention. They were happy in their isolated valley, a family unit of 3 against the world. But Franklin sometimes wondered about the future, about what would happen when Maya was old enough to ask questions about other people, about where she came from, about why she looked different from both her parents. Those questions came sooner than expected. Maya was 3 years old, bright and verbal when she asked, "Why do I have green skin?" They were sitting by the stream, Maya playing in the shallow water while Franklin and Grenna watched. Grenna answered carefully. Because I have green skin and you are half me, half your father. But father is pink, Maya observed. I am, Franklin agreed. Because I'm human. Your mother is orc, you're both. What is orc? Maya asked. Franklin and Grenna exchanged glances. They had known this conversation was coming, but that did not make it easier. Orcs are a different people, Grenna explained. We look different from humans. We have green skin and tusks and pointed ears. We are often stronger and faster, but we are still people just like humans are people. Are there other orcs? Maya asked. Yes, Grenna said. Many. They live in clans in the mountains and forests. Can I meet them? Someday, perhaps, Grenna said, though Franklin could hear the uncertainty in her voice. Maya seemed satisfied with this answer and went back to playing. But Franklin knew more questions would come, harder ones, about why they lived alone. Why there were no other children for Maya to play with. Why the world was just their family and no one else. As Maya grew older, Franklin began to worry about her isolation. She was bright and social, loved hearing stories about the town Franklin had come from, about the people Grenna had known in her clan. She needed more than just her parents. When Maya was 5, Franklin made a decision. We should go back, he said one night after Maya had gone to bed. Grenna looked up from her sewing. Back where? To Millbrook or somewhere like it. Maya needs other children. She needs education, socialization, a community. They will hate her, Grenna said flatly. She is half orc. She will be an outcast. Maybe, Franklin said. Or maybe enough time has passed. Maybe people are ready to see past their prejudices. We won't know unless we try. And if we try and they reject her, hurt her, what then? Franklin had no good answer for that. But he also could not imagine raising Maya in complete isolation, cut off from the world. She deserved a chance at a normal life. We go back carefully, he said. We send letters first, feel things out. We visit before committing. If it's not safe, we come back here. But we have to try for Maya's sake. Grenna was quiet for a long time. Finally, she nodded. For Maya's sake. But at the first sign of danger, we leave. Franklin wrote to Bill Henderson, explaining the situation, that he and Grenna had a daughter, that they were considering returning, that they wanted to know if they would be safe. He rode to the nearest settlement, 3 days away, to post the letter. The reply came 6 weeks later. Bill's handwriting was careful and measured. Franklin, things have changed here. Samuel Grimes died last winter, pneumonia. Without his influence, people have calmed down considerably. The territorial government has been pushing integration policies, encouraging peaceful coexistence with orc communities. There's even been talk of amending the marriage laws to recognize human orc unions. I think you and your family would be welcome here now. At least, you would be welcome in my store and my home. I cannot speak for everyone, but I believe most folks have moved on. If you decide to return, you can stay with us until you get settled. Bill. Franklin showed the letter to Grenna, and they spent days discussing it, weighing risks and benefits. Finally, they made the decision to visit, just for a few weeks, to see how people reacted to Maya. The journey back to Millbrook felt surreal, retracing the path they had taken 5 years earlier in the opposite direction. Maya was excited, asking endless questions about towns and stores and other children. Franklin and Grenna tried to prepare her for the possibility that some people might be unkind, but at 5 years old, she could not really understand prejudice. They arrived in Millbrook on a warm spring morning, the wagon rolling down the familiar Main Street. People stopped and stared, just as they had years before, but the energy was different. Instead of hostility, Franklin sensed curiosity. Bill Henderson came out of his store, older and grayer but smiling broadly. Franklin, Grenna, and this must be Maya. Maya hid behind Grenna's legs, suddenly shy. But when Bill crouched down and offered her a piece of candy, she took it with a small smile. "Thank you for the letter," Franklin said, shaking Bill's hand. "We're going to take things slow, see how it goes." "Smart," Bill said. "Come on, let me show you the rooms I've prepared." They stayed with the Hendersons for 2 weeks, and it was a revelation. People were curious about Maya, some even charmed by her. Children her age approached her cautiously at first, then included her in their games when they saw she was friendly. A few adults were still suspicious or disapproving, but the open hostility Franklin had feared did not materialize. Doc Peterson examined Maya and declared her healthy and developing normally. "Fascinating," he muttered, making notes. "First half-orc child I've ever examined. She seems to have the best traits of both species: strong, quick to heal, but also intelligent and socially adept." The local teacher, a middle-aged woman named Mrs. Sarah Whitmore, offered to tutor Maya if they decided to stay. "She's bright," Whitmore said after spending an afternoon with the girl. "Very curious. She would do well in a structured learning environment." By the end of the second week, Franklin and Grenna had made their decision. They would stay, at least for a while, and see if they could make a life here. Bill Henderson helped them find a small property on the edge of town, a modest house with enough land for a garden and a few animals. It was not perfect. There were still people who avoided them, who whispered behind their backs, who told their children not to play with Maya. But there were also people who welcomed them, who invited them to community events, who saw them as just another family. Maya started school and thrived, making friends and learning quickly. She was sometimes teased about her green skin and small tusks, but she handled it with a resilience that amazed Franklin. When she came home crying one day because a boy had called her a monster, Grenna held her and said, "Some people fear what they do not understand, but you are not a monster. You are strong and brave and kind. Never forget that." "Like you, Mama," Maya said. "Like both of us," Grenna corrected. The years passed and the master's family became part of Millbrook's fabric. Franklin took on occasional work as a deputy when the local sheriff needed help. Grenna ran a successful garden, selling produce at the market and teaching other women her growing techniques. Maya excelled in school and became known as a fierce friend and a natural leader. When Maya was 10, something remarkable happened. A small group of orcs from a clan that had signed the peace treaty visited Millbrook, seeking to establish trade relations. It was tense at first, with townspeople nervous and the orcs wary, but Franklin suggested that Grenna meet with them, serve as a bridge. The meeting took place in the town square, with half of Millbrook watching. Grenna stood tall and spoke to the orc delegation in their language, which Franklin had never heard her use before. It was guttural and rhythmic, completely unlike the careful English she spoke at home. The lead orc, an older female with intricate scars and elaborate tusks, responded in the same language. The conversation went on for several minutes, and Franklin saw Grenna's expression shift from cautious to surprised to something like joy. When she finally turned back to Franklin and the watching crowd, there were tears on her face. "They recognize my exile scars," she said. "They know my story, and they say I am brave to have chosen peace over tradition. They want to know if there are others like me, other exiles who seek to live among humans. They want to offer them a place in their clan, a new clan built on peace." It was a turning point, not just for Grenna but for the whole region. Over the next few years, more orcs and humans began to interact peacefully, trading and even forming tentative friendships. The territorial government officially recognized human-orc marriages, making Franklin and Grenna's union legal in the eyes of the law. Maya grew into a remarkable young woman, fully comfortable in both her human and orc heritage. She spoke both languages fluently, moved easily between both communities, and became a natural mediator when conflicts arose. People came to see her not as a half-breed or an oddity, but as proof that the two species could coexist, could even create something beautiful together. On Maya's 18th birthday, Franklin and Grenna threw a party that brought together humans and orcs in a celebration that would have been unthinkable 20 years earlier. Franklin stood on his porch, watching the mixed crowd laugh and dance and share food, and felt a profound sense of accomplishment. Grenna came to stand beside him, her hand finding his automatically. They were older now, both graying, both carrying the marks of a hard life. But they were also happy, deeply and genuinely happy. "You ever regret it?" Grenna asked quietly, "choosing me over the easy life you could have had?" Franklin looked at her, at the woman who had changed everything, who had taught him that love was bigger than fear, that courage meant standing up for what was right even when the whole world was against you. "Not for a single second," he said. "You and Maya are the best things that ever happened to me. I would make the same choice 1,000 times over." Grenna smiled, and in that smile Franklin saw the young orc who had pulled him from the rubble, who had stood with quiet dignity in front of a mob, who had built a life with him against impossible odds. "I love you, Franklin Masters," she said. "I love you too," he replied. "Always have. Always will." They kissed there on the porch, just as they had that first night when he had confessed his feelings, surrounded by the sounds of celebration and hope. The world had not become perfect, but it had become better, one small choice at a time, one act of courage building on another. Inside the house, they could hear Maya laughing at something, her voice bright and full of life. She was their legacy, proof that bridges could be built between divided peoples, that love could triumph over hate. As the sun set over Millbrook, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, Franklin held his wife close and counted his blessings. He had stood on his porch with a rifle, ready to die for what he believed in. But he had found something better than a noble death. He had found a reason to live, a future worth fighting for, a love that made everything worthwhile. The mob had come for the orc girl at midnight, and the human sheriff had stood on the porch and cocked his rifle. But that was not the end of the story. It was only the beginning, the first step in a journey that would lead to family, community, and a kind of happiness Franklin had never imagined possible. Years later, when Franklin was in his 70s and Grenna was beginning to show the signs of age that came slower to orcs than humans, they would sit on that same porch and tell their grandchildren the story of how they met, how they fought for their love, how they built a bridge between two worlds. And the children, both fully human and half-orc, would listen with wide eyes and ask, "Were you scared, Grandpa, when the mob came?" And Franklin would answer honestly, terrified, "But your grandmother was worth being scared for. Love is always worth fighting for, no matter how hard it gets." Grenna would add in her measured way, "And sometimes the scariest thing and the right thing are the same thing. You do it anyway." The grandchildren would nod, absorbing the lesson, and Franklin would look at Grenna and see in her eyes the reflection of all their years together, the struggles and triumphs, the fear and joy, the countless small moments that had built a life. They had proven that different peoples could come together, that love could cross any divide, that the future did not have to repeat the hatreds of the past. And in doing so, they had created something bigger than themselves, a legacy that would ripple outward through generations. The mob had come for the orc girl at midnight, and the human sheriff had stood on the porch and cocked his rifle. But in the end, it was not violence that won the day. It was love, patience, courage, and the stubborn refusal to let hate dictate the shape of their lives. And that, Franklin thought as he held Grenna's hand and watched their grandchildren play in the yard, was the only story worth telling.